James is eating grilled tilapia with some veggies and baked potato. And I am talking about Fear of Rain. That got top of the stack rating. Antman, Wasp, whatever, Quantumania. Father of the Bride. Are you being served the movie? A Kid Like Jake and Creed 3. And I really don't know whether there was a Creed 1 and 2 or what this means. This is the first time I've seen of this. And I don't know why anybody would want to watch more of these movies if there were another two, because this was really boring. Honestly, I didn't even look up. I was writing poetry, didn't even look up. It was that bad. That's why I got the bottom of this stack. It was that bad. So.
Oh.
What?
Is that a boxing movie?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Creed is one of the guys involved in the Rocky things, isn't he? Was Rocky a boxing thing? I think. So he's the black guy who was, like fighting.
So is
not
this a
against
fictional
Rocky.
Person? This is a fictional character?
So there we go. So, and now...
It says it doesn't say it's based on a true story. It says after dominating the boxing world with his career and family life thriving, Adonis Creed finds himself blah, 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 blah.
It's part of the Rocky thing, but now with the race mania, forget Rocky. You see, he's not, guess what?
Well, I mean, really, are there any good white boxers? Should I put that in the inside?
Yeah.
Okay. You talk about something for a minute, and I'll get back to this.
Yeah, we'll talk about the race mania. So now, in the wake of Black Lives Matter 2014, is that when it started going crazy, and especially the George Floyd thing and so on and so forth. There's a form of mania out there called race mania, where they already had affirmative action and all this sort of stuff. That's been since 1965, I believe, in universities. Universities have kind of been allowed, I think, to a certain extent mandated in the United States to selectively admit so-called people of color. Now, when I look at Rocky, when I look at Sylvester Stallone or Stallone, whatever you want to call him, he looks like a person of color. He looks like Omar Sharif, who is considered something of almost like a sex god. And when I was a kid, maybe even a little bit, before I turned 18 or whatever, what was he in Dr. Zhivago? He was playing presumably a Russian or something like that. So he's considered a bit of a heartthrob. You go one side of the Mediterranean and they're white. You go the other side of the Mediterranean and they're people of color. Cut the crap. Cut the crap. North side of the Mediterranean, people basically look the same color as the people on the south side. Cut the crap. I'm tired of it.
All right. Fear of Rain. This was an awesome movie. It might kind of bother some people watching a movie about a schizophrenic teenage girl. But, I mean, it really puts things into perspective when, a lot of teenage girls, the world is so terrible. Imagine having schizophrenia as a teenager. Boy, that would be terrible. But this movie brings up a lot of issues that are important to realize. And yet, it's an entertaining movie. It's just a fictional sort of thing. And it brings to light what people expect to see and so don't see, and what other people are more open to see, because everything to them is questionable, right? So it's a really interesting movie. And at the same time, I mean, I'm watching this thing, and the girl, she doesn't want to be on her medication because she can't. When she's on her medication, she tells her therapist she feels like a zombie and she can't do her art when she's. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's not as important as much as I love writing poetry and singing and painting and stuff like that. Um, if you're home and you're locked away at home and you want to not be on meds, and or in a facility you want to be locked away and able to do your painting and not be on meds, okay. But if you're around other people, and in this case the girl, I mean, she didn't seem to be really a major threat, but there are people with schizophrenia who are threats to other people, and they can't help it, and it's scary for them, the world that they're having to live in, but they can't impose that world on other people. It's not right. So if you have schizophrenia, you have to be on your meds if you want to be around other people. Plain and simple. That's just it.
Yeah,
And
so Jim Gordon, who played drums on Layla, that thing by Eric Clapton, he schizophrenic, and he didn't stay on his meds, I presume. And he killed his mother. Okay. He should have been away from other people, in places, in some sort of place a lot nicer than mental institutions used to be, or whatever they called them now. And I'm sure nicer than they are now. They might be worse now. I don't think that they should be required to have shock therapy. I don't know if shock therapy actually helps folks out. If they stay on meds, and they should be monitored, they should be allowed to be out. Because from what I can tell, the meds will calm them down enough so that they're not a threat to other people. I know one guy, we were in a club, and the club was a schizophrenic person, and I actually kind of diagnosed the guy, a schizophrenic person. And
yeah, but he actually had professional diagnosis too. It wasn't just you, oh yeah, he's.
Believe me, I wouldn't go with that. Yeah, I spoke to him at long distance. I was walking to the laundromat, and I had my bag of laundry over my shoulder, and probably was running really, but I was a very, very long block away. You have no understanding how long the blocks are, some of them coming up to Mary McGrath Drive here in Lethbridge. So I could see this guy waiting at the corner. I would have been running. That explains how I caught up with the fellow, because I was so far away. But I could see he was like this. His head was over to one side. And I'd read a guy called Levin, who was a follower of Wilhelm Reich. Again, don't get the wrong impression. Wilhelm Reich was prosecuted, and some people think, including himself, that he was persecuted by the authorities in the United States, medical and legal as well, criminal authorities. And so Loven, in one of his books, describes kind of like the hangman look, I think that's what he calls it. He says, I think he says it's not a guaranteed sort of thing. In other words, if a person doesn't have it, they're not schizophrenic, or something like that. But anyway, and I've known schizophrenics, or at least people have told me that they're schizophrenic. They're fairly upright. But at any rate, I got to the corner because the light took a long time to change, and it didn't take me a long time to run. I used to run without the laundry something close to a 4-minute mile. Say about 4:15. And that's about 1,600 meters, I think. Anyway, I caught up with him, and I didn't think much of it. So he accompanied me to the laundromat, got across the Mary McGrath Drive, it's called here in Lethbridge. 4 lanes. Back then it wasn't busy traffic. It's not that busy nowadays. Anyway, about a block on the other side, there's a laundromat there. So I was laundering, and the guy hung with me, and stayed all the time I was laundering. And by the time my laundry was done, he told me he was schizophrenic. Wow. Wow. Anyway, our mutual friend, who was in the club, thought that he could kind of talk this fellow down, the schizophrenic, just talk him out of it. Wow. He never realized what the schizophrenic was saying about this person who's in a club. Basically, the guy found the club. It was what he was saying about him. He was saying he was like the devil and stuff like that. This guy was thinking he could talk down the schizophrenic, was risking his life. And I guess ultimately I could have been. I don't know. But the fellow would go off of his meds, you could tell, because he wouldn't want to eat. He was figuring he was getting poisoned. So he'd go from being overweight. My sister was schizophrenic, and the meds that she took, from what I can figure, killed her. In other words, she probably had something like a congenital heart condition. My mom had a heart condition that was congenital, and she presumably passed it on to my sister. And my sister was somewhat overweight, considerably overweight. She wasn't until she went on the meds. It just seems to slow the metabolism down. And my sister had a heart attack when she was maybe 46 years old, something like that. And that was all she wrote. It killed her. So my sister, from what I could tell, stayed on the meds. I can't recall her going like this with her weight. Whereas this guy that we're talking about is in the club.
Well,
like this.
yeah, that's what seemed a little bit unbelievable about this movie, is that the person is a female. And I think, like in every case that I've heard, females stay on meds, whereas the males don't.
Yeah,
so
the men, the guys are just, they're not as domesticated. What I figure is men have domesticated women, but women haven't been able to domesticate men. And of course, men haven't been able to domesticate themselves, in the sense of they try to domesticate other men, but not themselves. Charlie Manson's a case in point. Founders of some religions are other cases in point, and one in particular I can think of. But so cult leaders are these kind of folks that like domesticating other people. Joseph Stalin domesticated other people. He ran whole herds of people, millions and millions of people. Mao Zedong, another, or Mao Zedong, if you want to go
or
with
attempted to.
Current
I mean, people
mispronunciation.
know creatures are domesticated really quickly. It takes generations and generations,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, so if one person wants to try to impose domestication, groups of humans, well, it's not going to work. They're only one person. They're not around to do it for generations and generations.
So I get the idea of men domesticating women from a report I ran across in Scientific American about a generation ago, and they were shocked. They were reporting the Russians, this would be the Soviets back then, domesticating silver gray foxes. I think that's what they were called, for the fur industry. They wanted foxes that were more, whatever they're, silver foxes, Anyway, that were more tractable, and they managed to do it. And it didn't take that long. You know, like the commies were in power for, let's say, we'll say two and change generations. So they might have started doing the work there in Russia before the communists took over. I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember the details. But they reported that the foxes had a variety of different things that you wouldn't find in the wild. So tails that stuck up instead of just, like hanging down. Tails that were curly, like a pig's tail.
Or bushy, or whatever.
Or they could be bushier, all of them, like Persian cats. I don't know if you run across too many wild cats, felines, that are bushy. You can get tigers or lions that are bushy manes and stuff like that. But it's not that good in the wild to have fur. Whereas
which also calls into question the hypothesis, or I guess it's just generally accepted. It's not even suggested to be a hypothesis, but it calls into question the domestication of, or lack of domestication of animals in the Americas and Africa. Right?
Of course.
Because this did not take the Russians very long.
No. So you'll get people saying, oh, the folks in the New World, one of the reasons why they weren't, of course nowadays they wouldn't even say it, but when I was a kid, it was the excuse. Why they didn't keep up with people in the old world is because they didn't have domesticatable animals. What's that about?
Well, who says
Caribou
that having
are basically
domesticated animals is really puts people ahead anyway? I mean, that's people have just jumped to make this conclusion all of a sudden, and then they jump to make other conclusions. Okay. It's ridiculous.
It gives you options. That's all so-called civilization. It gives you options, and then you can. Same sort of thing with science. It gives you options that you don't have otherwise. When you don't have those options, then you're stuck with a life expectancy of maybe 30 years, average life expectancy. You get people who live up to into their 80s, but they'd be the exceptions that prove the rule. You'd have lots of kids die in infancy and childhood. Maybe half your kids. Fun times. At any rate, well, what I was going to finish it up, like furriness, but the opposite as well. Like with pigs, lack of hair, and that's when I was going. Hey, I think guys have been able to, men have been able to domesticate women and to end up with a lack of hair, like pigs. But
you mean body hair?
Body hair. Well, exactly right. So I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
So that's anyway. It's just a thought. Don't go around saying. Now James believes this. I'm just offering that as a thought. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
All right. So in this movie, I did guess the thing about the mother. So I don't know. I still think it was good what they did with that, but I also thought it was pretty obvious. But anyway, on to Quantumania. Great special effects, and always good to see Bill Murray. And Michelle Pfeiffer she has to be a vampire. She looks amazing. Still, always so beautiful.
She might be older than me.
Yeah.
So in her 70s.
She's incredible. So the movie was worth watching. I like the little Antman guy, and I don't know, it's kind of silly, but whatever, it's for kids. Father of the Bride, it seemed long. I don't know how long, 117 minutes, so I don't know, maybe a little bit, but
that's almost 2 hours.
Yeah,
that's quite long.
So it seemed too long to me. But and honestly, I'm not into these whole marriage movies, whatever.
The romance or
Yeah, I don't know.
romantic
It's-
comedies? Is it a romantic?
I guess it's supposed to be sort of ish. Not really very comical, but I guess, yeah, it's supposed to be. But are they ever, these sort of movies? They're never really, honestly. Are You Being Served the movie? How did this get down so far in the stack, especially under that? Well, it just, I expected so much more given that I love the series. Everyone loves this series. The series is so good, and the movie, not so good.
Even my dad loved it.
My
And my
grandparents
dad
loved
was
it.
a very strict Christian. I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff was kind of risque humor like this.
Mhm.
He'd turn the TV off, like laughing. I can remember early 70s him turning the TV off one time. Caused a big fuss in the family, so on and so forth. But yeah, there's a lot of what we would otherwise consider dirty. But
I know. I never would have guessed my grandparents would have liked watching this show, but they did. I don't know how this show got away with reaching such a diverse audience, I suppose. Kid Like Jake. This had, what's his
hey,
name?
it's Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah. And
Look as though he's playing a different role there.
yeah, he did. He did a good job. But I mean, not great. He didn't, I mean, he's up with Octavia Spencer and Claire Danes. And honestly, the person who did the best job in this movie by far was Claire Danes. She did an awesome job, and I don't think she was playing herself at all. I didn't get that impression, but wow, she really did a good job. Having said that, the movie was boring. I don't really care about a little boy having troubles because he wants to dress up in dresses. Honestly, I had a hard time caring. Big deal. But I guess to some people that might be a big deal. To some parents, they might think it's a tough time or whatever. I don't see it as even being an issue. So why wrap a whole movie around that? It just seems like it's kind of a sideline in a movie, not the topic. You know what I mean? Maybe it would have been a topic back in the 1960s or something, or in other cultures, but not here, not now. It just doesn't seem like it to me. And now that James explained to me that this guy is from the Rocky movies, it still sucked.
He might have been from the first
but
one, of course.
I understand I think there were multiple Rocky movies. Rocky was really big in the time, and I didn't watch them. I didn't care about them either. They would have probably been on the bottom of my stack.
So let's just talk a little bit more about
okay.
this. Okay. So blacks have to have, or African Americans have got to have this for their to make themselves feel better about themselves. What's that about? Like when I hit Canada in 1964, I had my favorite boxer all of a sudden. He'd just become world champion. Who would that have been, do you think?
Muhammad Ali.
Yeah! And all the kids my age, so I was 10 years old, that was their favorite boxer. 1964 is a ways back. I don't have to tell you. If I was 10 years old, I was 59 years ago. A generation, most people calculate, is 30 years. 60 years is 2 generations. 2 generations is a freaking long time. There are lots of people who are cheering for Muhammad Ali who are no longer with us.
And also, besides the point, I mean, if making a movie about a black boxer, big deal. Who cares? There's lots of them. Really, when you look at boxing, do you think of any white boxer nowadays that you're like, oh yeah, that guy's I want to bet for that guy to win? Nobody would, right? So the whole fact with the Rocky movies, I think, is there's some white guy who doesn't look really big, but he's gonna somehow win. And so if you want to
Despite
make
the disadvantages.
yeah, so if you
know,
want
he
to
wouldn't
make a
have
sort
as
of
long reach as the black guy. So,
Yeah.
like one of the things you do is a jab, a left jab if you're right-handed, to keep someone away from you.
Yeah.
Jab, jab if your arms are longer, and it's just that way on average. It's an average sort of thing. It's not guaranteed that black people have longer arms. Jab, jab, jab. You jab them over the white guys get cut more easily.
So honestly, I think this movie's boring anyway. The whole idea of this series of movies is boring.
Yeah.
If you want to make a movie where there's I don't know, a black hockey player who's the big hero and everything, I can't think of any black hockey players, are there?
Yeah, okay. When
Right?
I was a kid, a guy made it with the Boston Bruins for a couple of days.
Okay, well there you go. It would work.
Well,
It would work.
Kind of, sort of.
Well, why
I mean,
wouldn't it?
I know, but again, it's like it's racist. It's race mania to emphasize that.
Or make
So-
a movie about a Chinese basketball player who, like, somehow he's awesome.
Well,
He's
there
the
was a
top
guy who was 7
basketball.
feet tall. He had no
There
jump.
you go.
And
Make
when
a
he
movie
jumped,
about him.
he was actually 6'11". I don't know how it seemed like when he jumped, he was shorter than when he
Oh.
was standing straight.
No.
What was his name? Yao Min. I can't remember his name.
Okay, well, don't make
he
a
wasn't
movie
that
about
good.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Make
like,
a fictional guy
Rocky
who's
is,
actually.
Rocky is going against type. And, same sort of thing with what Pauline's talking about. If they want to do something for African Americans and help them out, have something about, I mean, you have to get someone who's pudgy a little bit and maybe doesn't have so much of the thug talk. Play Neil deGrasse Tyson. Pauline's even knows Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's now he's being pumped up as the world's greatest astronomer or something like that. He's just a popularizer. I think he's actually qualified to be an astronomer. I'd have a PhD, but it's a start. You know, like you know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is, right? That black astronomer. He did a great course,
don't know.
right?
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
remember.
Anyway, he's kind of pudgy. He's not going to be. That's maybe some people think he's sexy. I don't know, but have a movie about him. You know, like he probably had to go through a lot of stuff. And one of the worst things would be if he came from a typical African American community, is getting his fellow African Americans to respect him. Who's it? Steve Urkel or Yerkel, the guy with the Wonder Wedgie? He was a TV character, right? The guy did he have big glasses? He kind of talked stupid.
Yeah,
and all
why
that,
not make
but
a
he didn't,
movie
yeah.
about him
Yeah.
having grown up and becoming successful?
You know, like
And
Yeah.
And somehow has this really hot wife and
yeah,
everything.
Yeah.
And next to whoever was the Studley guy in that show.
yeah. So have something about Tiger Woods.
And how
I
he
mean,
wasn't
Tiger Woods
successful.
had to go through. You know, like when I was a kid. Black people weren't allowed to play on one of the 4 courses that were used for the most important golf,
Okay,
the
but
Masters.
I mean, there was so much controversy with Tiger
About-
Woods.
Well,
I don't know. People won't
Well,
watch.
I'm not necessarily Tiger Woods. You could have a fictional character, a golfer or something like
Sure.
that. Who had to go through some stuff.
I don't
Or Venus, not so much. Who's that idiot? Serena Williams, her sister, who's just pumped up on steroids.
Well,
They
there's
some
already made a
football
movie
player-
about her.
Did they?
Yeah,
Oh,
they
see,
made a
there you
movie.
go.
It was okay. They did a good job.
Yeah, but Venus Williams seems like a whole lot more attractive kind of character.
Well, she was in the movie.